You guys ready? It's recording. Today is October 13th, and this is interview 3 with Felicia Graber. Rachel Brustein and Hannah Dubau are doing the interview. Nadav Marcus is doing the note-taking, and Joshi Parasaber is doing the video recording. Am I all good?
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Okay.
So how did you find out you were Jewish? Because you said in the last interview you thought you were Catholic for years.
Well, actually, I didn't find that out until 2 years after the war, when we had left Poland, because even after the war, after liberation, it was still too dangerous. It wasn't safe to live as Jews in Poland. And so we left Poland I'm having a blank, 1947, and went to Belgium. And that's when I was told by my father two things. Number one, that he was my father, because remember I told you I thought he was my stepfather, and also that I was Jewish. That was at that time. And that's what I call when I found out.
So, how long did your family stay in Europe after the war?
Okay, we were liberated in February of 1945, and things were pretty rough because the country was a mess. We were liberated by the Russians, and the Russians, unlike the Americans, Americans helped people. The Russians did the opposite. Like we had food on the farm where we stayed. I told you about the farm,
Yeah.
right? We had food on the farm while the Germans were there, but because the Germans were interested in the farmer to raise crops, because they had to give a certain amount of their crops to the German army. But when the Russians came, they just took everything. There was no food, period. So my father needed to start making a living. And so first we went to the city of Lodz. For some reason or other, Lodz had not been bombed that much, apparently. I'm not exactly sure why. My father tried, he had all kinds of connections, and he tried to set up a watch repair shop. Make a long story short, he actually found a shop, but no tools. And so, a shop without tools doesn't really help much. And so he heard from someone that the city of Danzig up north in Poland had not been bombed because the Germans surrendered or left, whatever. Anyway, so he hitched a ride with the Russian soldiers up north. And again, to make a very long story short, it turned out not to be true. The city had been just like Warsaw. I'm not sure who bombed the city, whether it was the Russians or the Germans, but the city was basically in ruins. But he did find his way to a little town near Danzig called Sopot, S-O-P-O-T.
Could you spell Danzig?
S-O-P-O-T. Oh, Danzig? D-A-N-Z-I-G. Oh, it's Gdansk in Polish. G-D-A-N-S. K. Anyway, and there somebody told him that there had been a watchmaker store on the main street that was absolutely in ruins, and he actually searched through the rubble and found some tools, managed to get a store, and actually was the first got the first permit after the war from the city of Sopot to open up a store. And my father figured that he would, people after liberation needed watches to go back to work, and they needed glasses. Watches, he was a watchmaker, so that was not a problem. But then he hired an optician to fit glasses. And over the next couple of years, he became very successful. Unfortunately, in 1947, I believe it was, the Polish government was totally taken over by the Russians, by the communists. And again, it's much more involved than I'm saying now, but my father was being blackmailed by the Polish equivalent of the IRS, that he owed taxes no matter. He showed them that he had paid, but they said no, that they still owed more money. A couple of weeks later, they came back and said he needed more. They demanded more money. Bottom line is that he went to a friend for some help. Basically, was told there's only one way, and you have to get out of the country, otherwise you're going to end up in Siberia. And so he bribed Belgian consul to give us exit visa from Poland and an entry visa to Belgium.
Were you with your father?
It was my father, my mother, and myself.
We're all together.
Yes, we were all together. And but in order to get a passport, and I don't really know exactly why, because I think I told you last time that our original name was Lederberger. There was and then during the war, my father's name was changed to Larkey, and then my mother, quote unquote, married my father, so she became a Larkey. And but in order to get a passport, for some reason or other, it was either impossible or too dangerous to get the passport under the name of Lederberger. So my father officially changed our family name from Lederberger to Larkey, and that's what it is to this day.
Do you ever consider changing it back?
Oh, yes, that's been what do you call? My mother wanted very badly, although my father never got around to it, and I really don't know the ins and outs. My brother was going to change it, but then he got his MD, so all the papers are as Larkey. And he's got two sons who are, one is a dentist, one is a physician, so they're Larkey. And my nephew has twin boys, so I think the Larkey is there.
Could you spell the two names?
Lederberger is Lederberger, Lederberger, and Larkey is Biallecki. And and this is so we were in Europe what do you call? We left. I'm sorry. We didn't leave Europe. We left Poland in 1947. Went to Belgium. Was it your question when we left Europe or when we left?
Well, I guess I'm curious about where you lived in Europe after the war, but before you came to the United States.
Okay. So first we were, because like I said, first was lodge and then supper, and then we went to Brussels, Belgium. The Belgian government gave us political asylum, but they did not give work permit to any foreigners, because their soldiers were coming back from the war, and I don't know if that was the real reason or not, but no foreigners got work permit. However, Germany was basically an open country. Germany was divided into a Soviet zone, an American zone, French zone, and a British zone. And the American zone was basically it was under American control, so you could work, you could do anything. And so my father commuted from Brussels, so about only 500 miles, approximately, Now, he didn't commute every day to make a living because he could not work in Belgium. And so, and the reason that, that took 4 years. The reason that it took 4 years is because my mother refused to move to Germany. She said she was not going to raise her children, because my brother was born in Poland before we left in 46. She was not going to raise her children in Germany. But in 1951, she finally gave in because it was just too much. And so we moved to Germany, to Frankfurt, and I first was sent to a French boarding school that was for French army children, because I had spent my first grade in Poland, second, third, and fourth in Belgium, and so my they figured it would be easier for me to go to a French school rather than straight to a German school. Besides, they did not trust the teachers. They didn't want to put me in the German school, and my brother was still too little, so it didn't affect him. And I was there approximately 2 years, but I was extremely unhappy. I came home every weekend, but I was very homesick, and it really did not work out. So I was taken out and brought into a German school, and it was a very unhappy time for me. Not that I found any anti-Semitism or any bad feelings, but any remarks or anything. But okay, after my father told me that I was Jewish, he started telling me about the war. He started telling me about my family in Tarnów and all our experiences and the Holocaust. And so at home I was hearing all these things, because the thing is also that survivors, whether in America or wherever they went, they clung together. So all our friends were survivors. And the topic of conversation was the war. And so I kept hearing all these stories, and then I was going to go to school and couldn't help thinking, now what did my classmates' fathers and mothers do during the war? And I was I couldn't bond, I couldn't make any friends. I was very unhappy. And so finally, when I was 16, I went to England to a boarding school, and I stayed there a year until I finished high school. And my dream was to come to America. That was my goal, my dream. My father had a cousin here in Brooklyn, and they had agreed to put me up. Well, first I started college. When I finished high school, I came back to Frankfurt and I started university or college. In Europe, you don't have college; you have right away university. And again, I was very lonely because I couldn't make any connection. I couldn't make any friends. There were just a handful of Jews. There were a few, but very, I think we had a youth group, quote unquote. I was the oldest. I was 11, 12, 13. I was the oldest. And there were only about 5 or 6 of us.
What was it called?
Oh, what was the group called? I don't know if it had a name.
Oh.
They had, what happened was that Israel sent a shaliach, how do you call it in English, a shaliach?
We know what that is.
Emissary to Germany to sort of bring some Jewish life with the children, and he's the one that put this group together, and that was my lifeline basically. So after I came back from England, I started university, but again, my goal was to come to America. I actually applied to Barnard College in New York, and at that time, one of the professors who was at the University of Frankfurt, who I was working for him, he happens to be a Jewish guy, I don't know what he was doing there, but he must have come back. I don't know. Never asked. Told me, you're not going to get in because they have a quota. They only allow a certain amount of Jews in, so you're not going to get in. He was right. I was rejected. My daughter ended up in Colombia, in Barnard, years and years later. Anyway, so I wanted to. I actually had everything set up to come to the States. And do you want the long story or the short story?
Long story.
Do you want the long one? That's my what do you call it? My romantic story. I was 18 years old at the time, and I really wanted to come to the States. So my parents decided that they were not too happy to send an 18-year-old overseas by herself.
They were happy to stay.
They were not too happy.
No, like they didn't. They wanted to stay in Europe.
It's not that they wanted to stay in Europe. They had applied for visa to America, which actually came through in 1956. And we actually did come to the States in 56, but my father just was not able at that point and to start all over again. He didn't speak English. He just decided it was just he couldn't cut it again, so he went back to Germany. So anyway, so my parents went to, they bribed me. And the way they bribed me was they knew that I loved to travel. And so they said, well, if you postpone your trip to America for 1 year, this summer we will fund your trips. You can go to Greece, because I had a good girlfriend. I had made a very good girlfriend, a Greek girlfriend while I was in England. You can go to Israel, you can go, and, and of course, you're not going to say no to that, right? So, you can go to Paris, because I love French literature, and I loved, one of my dreams was to go to see Paris. So they said, okay, you go to Paris, you can go to Rome, which you want to go to Greece, you can go to Israel. I mean, I got worldwide. And so I said, okay. And I actually went to Paris for a couple of weeks. And when I came back, actually, the day after I came back from Paris, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who worked for the Jewish Community Center in Frankfurt, Germany. And she said, Felicia, you have to do me a favor. I said, what's going on? She said, I have this American GI here, soldier here, who does not speak any German. He wants to meet a Jewish girl, to show him around. You're the only one I know who speaks English. Can you please do something with him? And so I talked to my mother. I said, what do I do with it? I don't know who this guy is. So my mother said, why don't you invite him for dinner and we'll sort of check him out. So he came over for dinner, and one of the first conversation he said, oh, you know what? There is a new Jewish chaplain that just was transferred to Frankfurt, and I arranged a double date with him and another Jewish girl. I said, fine. And that's how I met my husband. Okay, not the guy that wanted to meet the Jewish girl, but the one that double date, the chaplain. Chaplain is a clergy who works for the army, is called a chaplain. So that was in April, and we got married in December.
In Germany or?
In Germany.
What year was this?
That was 1959.
So the soldier introduced you to the other guy who was your husband?
He became my husband.
Okay.
Were you supposed to be on a date with the soldier?
Yeah. I was a date with a soldier, and he was a date with another girl. Okay? But a few days later, he called me. And he said, I swear it was love on the first sight of my part. I don't know about him, but I remember when he called me, I started trembling. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, I've made such a fool of myself. It wasn't funny.
So this was 1959?
It was April 1959. If you want
Do you know the exact? When was the marriage? When
we got married December 6, 1959.
And you met in April 19th?
Got engaged in June.
Short. Was that very common?
I don't know. I really don't know whether it was common or not. For me, it's just, I mean, I was 19 years old and I was just smitten, and, I would have gone to the end of the world. Now, I also changed my lifestyle because my parents had not been observant, and my husband is Orthodox. So, my parents were very concerned, actually, because it was a very different lifestyle. But I had actually no problems. I went from being a good Catholic to a Jew, to a sort of non-observant Jew, to not only Orthodox, but also a chaplain's wife, and later on a rabbi's wife. Both our children were born in 61 and 63 in the military hospital, American military hospital in Frankfurt, Germany. And in August and in December of 63, we were transferred to the United States.
Can you give the exact dates when your kids were born?
My daughter was born December 18th, 1961, and my son August 8th, 1963.
What's their names?
Sarah and Stephen. And so first we came to he was transferred to Fort Hamilton in New York.
Where is that?
It's in Brooklyn, I think.
So December 1963 you were transferred?
Right, December 24th, if you want to know exactly. We landed with we took the boat, USS United States, which is scuttled now. It doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. It was one of the worst storms in the Atlantic Ocean. My husband and my son slept through the whole trip. And my daughter, Sarah, was just 2 years old. In fact, she celebrated her birthday when we went on board. And she had a ball because they had a nursery, and there was no one in the nursery except her. So she had the whole place to herself. Anyway, we arrived in New York in one of the biggest snowstorms of the city. We were picked up by my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, my husband's family, and taken to Mount Vernon, New York, where my mother-in-law lived. And then we stayed there for a couple of weeks or so, and then my husband had to report to Fort Hamilton, which is in Brooklyn, to the advanced chaplain course. We spent about 6 months, and then we were transferred to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And in 1965, you probably never heard of it, but there was an uprising in the Dominican Republic, and President Johnson decided, I don't even know the ins and outs of it, who the good guys, bad guys, whatever, but President Johnson decided to send American troops to the Dominican Republic, and my husband was attached to a field hospital, so he was gone. And that was a very difficult time for me because, first of all, at first I didn't even know where he went. He was called on alert, and nobody knew where the troops were sent. But anyway, he was gone for about 6 weeks. Then he was transferred back. And after that, we decided that we were going to leave the army because originally my husband was going to stay in the army for 20 years. And so in 1965 we left the army, and he took a position in Elwood City, Pennsylvania as a rabbi. And I always called him the chief rabbi of Elwood City because he was the only one in town. Well, I went way beyond what your question.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because the other questions we had were about coming to the United States and meeting your husband, so
Oh,
you answered.
okay.
Did your parents ever come to the United States?
My
States?
parents didn't come to the United States until the 80s. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was 89, 88 or 89. By that time, my father was not well. He had dementia, and my mother couldn't handle him. And by that time, we lived in St. Louis. Because first, like I said, from Fort Hamilton, went to Fort Bragg, then to Elwood City, then to Pittsburgh. We lived in Pittsburgh for 4 years, and that's when my husband left the rabbin and became an educator. And I got my master's at University of Pittsburgh. No, my BA at University of Pittsburgh and my master's at Duquesne University. And then he got a job in St. Louis in 1972, and that's where we stayed until last December.
What do you have your master's and your BA in?
My BA is in social studies, because it's a long story how I got my BA. I mean, I never did anything the quote unquote normal way. Everything was a little convoluted, because I had gone for 2 years in Frankfurt University, and in Fort Bragg I enrolled in the University of North Carolina. And at that time I wanted to be a psychologist, so I had and I loved history, so I had a lot of history credits, I had a lot of psychology credits, and so when I went and talked to the University of Pittsburgh, I said, okay, what's the fastest way for me to get a BA? I don't care what, as long as it's the fastest. And they told me, social studies. And my advisor said, I never forget it, well, what you can do with this, with a degree in social studies is sell ties on the street corner. I said, I don't care, I want a BA. Anyway.
Still like that.
It's still like that?
What year was this?
That was, when did I get my BA? I think it was 71. Must have been 71.
That's when my dad got his.
I was juggling, I had 2 kids by that time, and anyway, and so once I got my BA, actually, I really didn't even finish my BA. I wanted to find a job, and my husband said, well, you speak German and you speak French, why don't you go to the Board of Education and see if they can use you? So I went to the Board of Education and spoke to the lady who was in charge of foreign languages, and she happened to be German and started speaking German with me, realized right away that I was fluent, and she put me on a substitute list. I had never been in a classroom in my life. About 6 weeks before the end of the school year, I get a phone call and said, the German teacher, one of the German teachers, got into a car accident and she's going to be out for the rest of the year. Can you take over?
This was at University of Pittsburgh?
No,
Public school.
Oh.
Pittsburgh Public Schools.
What year was this?
This was, it must have been 71. 70, maybe 69, 70 or 71. I would have to. Anyway, I didn't have my BA yet. I don't think I did. Or I almost had it. I don't remember whether I already had actually the degree, but I was almost there. So they gave me an emergency certificate. And then, like I said, it's about 6 weeks before the end of the school year. They called me, they said this teacher was out. And this teacher was a traveling teacher. That means that she wasn't teaching in one school. She was teaching in, I think, 3 or 4 schools. She was teaching in elementary school, 4th grade, once or twice a week. Middle school, once or twice a week. And high school, about once. Something crazy like that. And they sent me there. I'd never been in a classroom before. And I don't know how I survived. Don't ask me how I survived. I don't know. But the thing is, I must have done something right, because the following summer they called me and said they wanted to know if I wanted a job. And that's when I think, I don't know whether they gave me an emergency certificate then or when I was, probably gave me when I was substitute teaching. And so I said, but you have to go back to school and get your certification. That's the, condition. So I didn't want a full-time job because it was just too much. So I got a part-time job teaching German, and in the middle school it was one school, not traveling. And went back to school. That's when I went to Duquesne University, and I figured if I have to go back to school and get my certification, I might as well go get my master's. I mean, And when you go to get a certification, you have to do student teaching.
That's me next year.
That's you next year?
She's special ed.
Oh, you special ed? Well, I first went to the University of Pittsburgh because that's where I got my BA. And they said, well, you have to do student teaching, so you have to quit your job, and we're going to send you to school. And I said, you must be kidding. I'm not going to quit my job and be sent to school. I said, so I started university shopping. I got to the Duquesne University at the School of Education, and they said, oh, no problem. We'll send somebody to observe your job. You don't have to quit your job. So I said, fine, we're done business. And so that's what happened. I kept my job, and they sent some retired teacher who slept in the back of. He was so funny. He actually was dozing off, but he passed me. Anyway, I had a few run-ins with the lady who had originally hired me. She came to observe me and got very upset that I wasn't doing a good job. But anyway, she actually started yelling at me in front of the kids. It was just, I was in tears. And she then ran to the principal and asked him to fire me. So after school, I went to the principal, and I was in tears. I mean, she was horrible. So he said, calm down. He said, there are two types of teachers. Some are born and some are made. You're the second type. You will be a good teacher one of these days. And by that time, you'll leave my school. That's exactly what happened. I taught there for two years, must have been 2 years. Then my husband got a job in St. Louis. By that time, I got my certification and my master's. And we moved to St. Louis. And at the first year, I did try to get a job, but then I wanted to get settled and the kids settled. And then I started looking for a position, French or German. And I got this job in what that time was junior high. At that time, I was only teaching German. And then later on, I went back to school, got some more credits in French, and got certified in French also. And then later on, I was transferred to the high school until I retired in '96. And I actually think I became a pretty good teacher because till not too long ago, I was still in contact with some of my students. They were very, very, I mean, when I retired, every single class made me a party. Every single one. And one girl made me a quilt. I can show it to you afterwards. And she had all my students sign. So there was, I loved teaching, but I was burned out. I don't want to discourage you. Now, actually, I love the kids. It's the adults I couldn't stand.
That's my problem right now.
I mean, usually I can't say I had no problems with kids. You always have problems with some kids. But it was the principals and the counselors and the vice principals that I couldn't have done without.
During your career or like when you retired, what kind of like Holocaust education did you do, not within the school, but outside of the school with Jewish organizations?
Well, I actually started in St. Louis. My husband, when he first started in St. Louis, started as a assistant director and in charge of building up afternoon Jewish high school that he started, and also adult education. And I started teaching there literature of the Holocaust, and again this was basically all self-taught because I never really took any classes, any courses. So I taught history, literature of the Holocaust at the high school and also at the adult education. And I didn't really get involved about the Holocaust until a couple of things happened. For a long time, even when I taught the Holocaust, I never ever told anyone that I was a survivor. I never considered myself a survivor because I think I mentioned that to you before. I don't remember. That a lot of child survivors, but they're not the only one. All my friends, we were always told that we were too young to remember what, we were so lucky. You're not a real survivor. You don't remember, etc., etc., etc. So I never considered myself a survivor. I never thought the Holocaust had any impact on me. Occasionally I had dreams which I dismissed and stuff. And then two things happened. My father passed away in 1991 and my mother in 93. And I had always wanted to go back to Poland. Ever since I was told that I was Jewish, I was hearing stories about my hometown. So, but for all kinds of reasons, I didn't get a chance to go until 1994. And that was an extremely emotional trip for me. I felt I had gone to a graveyard, to Jewish graveyard. I went to my hometown. I tried to find my grandmother's grave, which I actually did not find, but later on, I did find it later. But it was really very traumatic, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that it took me about a year to get over it. And it was also the first time before the trip that I actually had the courage is the only word I can think of, the emotional courage to listen to my father's 12 hours oral history. I told you I think I told you that my father had taped 12 hours of oral history. And I had started listening to it, and I usually had to stop after the second tape because I just couldn't handle it. But before we left for Poland, I decided I had to listen to the whole thing, and I had to take some notes about addresses, etc. And then when I came back, and I sort of got my bearings, I decided that I had to do something. I was drawn to the Holocaust. It's almost like it was just like a hypnotized. I just had to do something. So I went to the Holocaust Museum in St. Louis, and even at that time, actually not as a survivor, but as a docent, as a guide in the museum. And I started being a docent there.
What year was this?
That must have been 98.
So after you retired.
I just have a quick question.
After I retired, yes. I couldn't have done it while I was teaching.
The first time you went to Poland, you went back in 94, who did you go with?
Okay, we went with my husband and also a Jewish group, actually, a rabbi here from Baltimore. What happened, I was looking for a group. I had two problems. Number one, it had to be an Orthodox group, because I wouldn't travel on Shabbos and I had to have kosher food. And kosher food in Poland in '94 was, you know, I mean, it was available. There actually was a kosher restaurant in Warsaw, but we didn't always, you know, it had to be arranged. And so actually my son is the one that saw that this one rabbi, who is not here anymore, he lives in Israel now, was putting together a group to go to Poland. And so we went with them, and actually it worked out great because the way that tour went, I had another thing that I wanted to make sure, that whenever they make the tour, I wanted the tour to end in the south of Poland, because my hometown is the south of Poland, so I wanted to stay on longer and go to my hometown. Most of the tours end up in Warsaw. So anyway, this tour was just perfect for us. It was Orthodox group, kosher food, everything arranged, and ended in Krakow, in the south of Poland. So this is how we went with. And after the group left, my husband and I stayed on. But first of all, when you travel in Europe, or even in America for that matter, and you're kosher, you have 2 suitcases. One suitcase with clothes, and one suitcase with food. And when the group left, everybody was, all the food that they had brought, they had leftovers, they gave us. And we had so much food that when we left Poland, we left all kinds of food in the hotel, and we were just laughing. So the maids are going to come in and going to see all these cans of tuna fish. They're going to wonder what was going on. Tuna fish and gefilte fish and, all that stuff.
Did your son and your daughter go on the trip?
No, it was just my husband and I. And so we stayed another week, and we went to my hometown, and then we took the train to Warsaw, and then we took the train, because we were leaving from Warsaw. Our flight was from Warsaw. And we went also to Sopot, where we had lived after the war. And when we were in Warsaw, that's when I actually did find the farm where we had stayed with that farmer. And that also, the way I found it is also just a story in itself, because.
Do you mind telling the story, Ted?
Oh, I don't mind if you're willing
Please,
to sit and listen.
We have 3 tapes.
You have 3 tapes, okay.
Hey, listen, can I just have one
The
quick
more
thing?
you talk, the more we avoid doing our homework.
Yeah.
Hey, she's being honest.
Have you ever been back to Germany since you left Germany? Or?
I went back once with my daughter.
Okay.
Just for a couple of days. I wanted to show her, because she was 2 years old. She didn't remember anything. So I went there. We were there for a couple of days or so.
Do your kids have German passports, or?
My daughter has 2 birth certificates. She's got a German birth certificate and an American birth certificate. But my son, who was born 20 months later, by that time they did not give German birth certificates. But he's got a. Both of them have an American birth certificate, but it's not like a regular birth certificate that you get in the States. It says it's an American born abroad, and it's signed by the Secretary of State. And my son, when he was getting married, he needed a birth certificate, and he brought this birth certificate to people here in Baltimore. He got married here in Baltimore. And the woman said, "That's not a birth certificate. I don't recognize it." So he says, "That's signed Dean Rusk. He was Secretary of State. What are you telling me?" Anyway, where was I?
Finding the farm.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Anyway, I did not know much about the farm. All I knew is the name of the city, little town, was called Chiliczki, which I showed you. I think I showed you the spelling last time, but I can show it to you.
No, it was me.
Oh, it was you. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you type it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I knew the name of the farmer, the last name, Chiliczki, and I also knew the name of a neighbor who was Tutkevich. That's all I knew. And I knew it, oh no, and also another thing that I knew was that it was near another town called Grodzisk. And Grodzisk is not very far from Warsaw. So we were in Warsaw. We were supposed to leave, I think, on a Wednesday or Thursday. So we had like a day with nothing to do. So my husband said, why don't we take a train to Grodzisk? Just like about an hour's ride or so. And I'm sure that since Chiliczki is near Grodzisk, somebody will try. Before I go there, from the time I got into Poland, I looked on every map I could think of, and I could not find Chiliczki. Anyway. I even went to the historical museum. There's a historical Jewish museum in Warsaw. Nobody could find Chiliczki. It's as if it disappeared. I found it later on the internet, but that was before I was internet savvy. I don't know if the internet existed then. Anyway, I had no idea where that place was. So we got to Grodzisk, and we got to the train station, and I asked the people, the people at the train station, do you know where Chiliczki is? Never heard of it. See, a lot of these little towns were taken over by other towns or changed, and names were changed. She said, but you know what? It's a small town. We don't stop there. Why don't you go to the bus terminal? The bus terminal might know. So we went to the bus terminal, asking where's Chiliczki, and said never heard of it. Never heard of the subject though. So I said, okay, I give up. Nothing I can do about it. And we were going back to the train station, and as we were walking back, we passed a line of cabs. And my husband said, you know what? Why don't you ask a cab driver? They might know. So I said, well, it doesn't hurt. So I approached the first cab driver, and I said, I had to do all the talking because my husband doesn't speak Polish. I said, where do you know it's a town by the name of Chiliczki? He said, sure. I said, is it far from here? No, he said, it's about 6 kilometers, which is about 3 miles, something like that. So I said, well, will you take us? Can you take us there? He said, of course. So we get into the cab, and we're driving, and we get to this intersection, and the driver asked me, okay, he said, Chiliczki, there are 2 parts of Chiliczki. You want me to go left or you want me to go right? I said, I have no idea. I don't know. So I said, all right, let's go left. So I said, okay. So we get on a dirt road. We get to this little village, and he said, okay, now where do you want me to go? I said, I don't know. I said, you have to stop. Okay, let's stop somebody, and everybody knows each other here. Maybe they will know either Sierociński. So we stopped this woman, and I said, do you know the family Sierociński? She says, no such family here. I know everybody in town. I'm sorry, nothing you can do about that. Nothing, I know everybody in town. There's no such family here. So I said, well, wait a minute. Do you know a family called Tutkevich, which I had known from my father, was a neighbor? She said, Tutkevich? Oh yeah, I know the Tutkevich. They live right, whatever. So she gave us the direction how to get to this Tutkevich. And I knocked on the door, and this old lady opens up, and I said, is this Mrs. Tutkevich? And she said, yes. And I said, my name is Felicia. I'm a daughter of Pan Andrzej. In Poland, they always call Pan is Mr. and Andrzej is his first name. So I asked him, I said, do you remember Pan Andrzej? And she said, Pan Andrzej, of course I remember him. Yeah, we still all remember him. We still talk about him. And I tell you why they still talk about him in just a minute. And I said, well, I'm his daughter. I'm little Felicia. And she was so thrilled, and she said, yeah, we old timers, we still remember Pan Andrzej. We still talk about him. He's a legend in this town, and let me tell you why he's a legend. When we lived on the farm, there was no indoor plumbing. And so how do you wash? You get a big bathtub, get the water from the well outside, and do a communal bath. You know, men, the women go out in the other room, the men wash, and I always say, I don't know if they change the water or not, I really don't know, and I don't ask. Anyway, once a week, okay? Forget about it every day, okay? Well, of course, my father, two things. First of all, he could not, because in Poland, only Jewish men were circumcised. So my father could not bathe with the men. Second of all, my father had this habit all his life that he needed to have a bath or shower, a cold bath every single day of his life. Even in a nursing home, he would have his last year of his life, he was in a nursing home. And in the summertime in St. Louis, it gets very hot, just like here, and the water from the tap water isn't that terribly cold. He had the nurse put ice in his water, because he's been like this all his life. He was like that all his life. Anyway, so but there was a small river nearby, so he would go every morning to the river and take his bath. Well, in the wintertime the river froze, so he took an axe, broke the ice, and took his bath. And people saw him from far, and they were still talking to him about that crazy guy from Warsaw who was bathing under the ice. And that's why he's still a legend among the old timers. Anyway, so she said, and I said, what about the Sierociński? Are they still around? She says, no, the old folks died, but the older daughter inherited the farm. But her name is not Sierociński because she's married now, it's Romanowski or something like that. So I said, well, do they still live in the farm? She says, yes, it's right next door. So we got to the taxi driver took us there. The first thing that we found was flies. That place was infested with flies. You've never seen so many flies in your life. We had to close the windows of the cab because the flies were just all over the place. Anyway, there was a young man working outside, and I asked him whether his parents were in, his mother actually, and he said yes. And so he went in, and she came out, and I again asked, do you remember Pan Andrzej? She says, of course I remember Pan Andrzej, and again the same story. He's a legend of old timers. I said, well, do you remember little Felicia? She said, well, of course. I said, well, guess what? And she was those hugs and kisses, and she was telling me how they always wondered what happened to us, that my father had come and, before we left Poland, my father had come and brought them some gifts, but they hadn't heard from us since, and she invited us into the farm, which is now modernized, electricity, new modern kitchen, television, and we sat around the table and talking about the good old times when we were one happy family. And I really wanted to tell them that their parents had saved the Jewish family, because I don't know if you remember last time I told you that my parents kept telling me that nobody knew we were Jewish. And as I was sort of thinking, now how am I going to tell this people? So but in our conversation, this conversation turned to politics. And my husband wanted to asked me to ask them how they liked the new president, because that was just shortly after Poland had the first free election after the war, because the communists had been defeated. Excuse me. And Lech Walesa was the president at the time. And so I said, how do you like your new president, Lech Walesa? Well, this woman's husband started screaming and yelling. Lech Walesa is a traitor to Poland. He is selling Poland to the Jews. Well, I froze. I literally froze. I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. And I just like, there was no way that I was going to tell them I was Jewish, of course. And I just changed the subject very quickly and said, we really have to leave. We have to take the train back to Warsaw. And I just wanted to get out of there. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as I could. And my husband said, well, what's going on? What's going on? I said, I'll tell you later. Let's get out of here. Anyway.
I just want to pause you. I need to change the tape.
I originally was supposed to stay 2 years in England. The first year to learn English and then to get my high school diploma. But this was so boring. The English for foreign language was so, for foreign student was so boring. I went to the principal and I said, "Go away, Jose. This is not going to work."
Did you just say that in German?
No, I said that in English. And anyway, that's a different story altogether.
Going back to the farm.
Go to the farm. Where did they stop?
You were
Russian
gonna
route.
Yeah, you were afraid that they would find out.
Well, so anyway, so as we were leaving, first of all, the husband said, because we had told them that we have grandchildren, he said, "Oh, next summer you're going to bring your grandchildren to stay on the farm." And in my mind, I just couldn't help seeing my grandsons with the yarmulkes showing up at the farm. I mean, I had this vision, of what he would think. Anyway, that was my sort of crazy thought. Anyway, but she ran after me and said that wanted to know if I wanted to meet her sister. That her sister who lived in a nearby town. So we said yes, and so she took us to her sister. And again, when she found out who I was, there were hugs and kisses, and we sat around the table for a couple of hours talking about the quote-unquote good old times, and she was telling me all kinds of stuff that I don't remember, what was happening on the farm, and but I never. Something very strange happened to me while I was there. First of all, I never mentioned that we were Jewish. Not only that, I suddenly felt I had become my mother. I was worried. I was very careful what I said, what words I used, and it was just a strange, very strange feeling. And when they wanted to see pictures of our grandchildren, I whispered to my husband, "Do you have any pictures that doesn't show yarmulkes? Then you can show them." I mean, I really was like, whether rightly or wrongly. I mean, what do you call it? Probably nothing would have happened to me, but it was just such an emotional thing. Anyway, so we left. In the next 12 years, we corresponded. Me with my crazy Polish. It took me half an hour to write one paragraph in Polish, because I knew what I wanted to say, but I didn't know how to spell it. And the dictionary doesn't help very much, because Polish changes the genders and changes when they go into the past tense or the future or whatever. It's crazy. Anyway, but we managed to correspond. And in the meantime, the one who lived on the farm died, and her husband died. So the only one left was the one, Janina, who lives in a small town. And I struggled for a very long time after coming back from Poland. I really felt that I wanted them to know that the parents saved the Jewish family. But I did not. I really did not know what to do. And I struggled, and I talked to people, and I talked with my husband, and I read, and I didn't know what to do, and shall I write them, shall I not write them, But I wanted a closure for myself. It was really more for myself than for them. And then I finally decided, you know what, let's forget it. There was also a halachic issue, a Jewish law issue, which my husband mentioned to me, is that I would disclose that my parents had first of all put them in danger without their knowledge, because if somebody would have found out, they would have been killed, the whole family. And number two, I would disclose my parents as liars, which you're supposed to honor your parents and not put, blame. I mean, anyway, I was going back and forth. But finally decided that I was just going to let it go. And I really had no plans of going back to Poland, although both of them, as long as the older one was still alive, and then Janina kept asking me to come back to Poland, and after her sister died, Janina kept saying, you are my young sibling, and I'm considered you're my youngest sister, and I didn't really want to see you, and all this, and I really didn't want to go back. I had it. As much as I'd wanted to go to Poland to begin with, I just didn't want to go. However, our oldest granddaughter was in Israel, so I figured, she's in Israel, it would be a good time maybe to take her to Poland. And when my daughter found out, she said, well, what about, I would love to go. And her oldest daughter, Esther, also would like to go. So the four of us actually went back went to Poland. And we went to my hometown, we visited, whatever. And we also, before we left...
When was this?
This was in 2005. Before we went to Poland, when I decided to go to Poland, I also decided that if I was going to go see Janina, that the Polish woman, she had to know that I was Jewish. I said, it's enough. I'm out of hiding. So I did not know how to put it to her. So I wrote her a letter saying that we had a very busy summer because one of our grandsons had a bar mitzvah in Israel. I figured, she'll get the message. Well, usually when I wrote her a letter, I received a response like by return mail within 12 to 14 days. This time, for 3 months, there was no answer, nothing. And so I sort of decided, well, our wonderful family relationship is terminated. However, there was a Polish priest who was visiting St. Louis, and I don't remember how I came to meet him, but I met him and I took him around the museum, and I told him my story. And he said, don't give up on Janina. I'm going back to Poland in a couple of weeks. I will get in touch with her, and I'll talk to her. So I said, fine. And sure enough, about a couple of weeks later, I got a letter from Janina telling me how, he emailed me and said that he talked to her. And I don't really know how he put it, but what he told her. Basically told him that we were Jews. How he did it, I really don't know. But, and then I got a letter from Janina telling me, she was so happy I was coming, and she wanted to meet my daughter and my granddaughters, but she did not mention anything about what she, that maybe Jewish, or how she felt about it, or nothing. So I really did not know, what to expect. The only thing that I want to make sure is that, because when we were there the first time, she wanted to feed us. And both my husband and I, we said, well, we had upset stomachs, we can't eat anything. And so I want to make sure that she doesn't prepare a meal for us. So I told her, the only thing, that please don't prepare anything, just fruit. Oh no, I want to serve you a meal. I said, no, just fruit and soda, that's it. Anyway, when we got to her apartment, and I said, Janina, I want to tell you that, we're a Jewish family. And to my big, surprise or whatever, she claims that they knew it all along. She claims that the father somehow found out or suspected or whatever that we were Jews, and he took the 3 women out into the fields, made them swear to keep it a secret, and told them that we were a Jewish family. And the reason he did so is because he told them that if they saw German soldiers coming, they should run and hide. So, I sort of decided that I'm not sure that what she's telling me is really true. I don't know if it's not true. There's no way that I can tell. And I decided that no matter what, they did help us, they did save us, and it really, bottom line, doesn't really matter. And I am in contact with her. I just called her the other day and talked to her, and I send her some money from time to time because she really lives very poor conditions. And in Poland, it's crazy. Like the oldest sister inherited the farm, and when she died, her older sister's son inherited. She didn't get anything. And while her sister was alive, she was helping her financially. But once her sister died, she really didn't. So that's the story of the farm. Like I said, I've decided that whether it's true or not that they knew at the end of the day doesn't really, matter. I did try to get them to. I did try to Yad Vashem and try to get called the Righteous Gentiles. They send me forms to fill out, and also one of the questions was, what took you so long? And so I told them that I was, all my adult life, I was told that my parents told me that nobody knew we were Jewish. And so I, did not know. And so, but I got a letter from Yad Vashem saying that since she was only 11 and I was only 2, 3, and 4 years old, and everybody else is gone, there's just no way to verify whether they really knew or not. So they would not acknowledge them. So I do what I can.
When have you been to Israel?
We were in Israel last time was 2006, I think. It was one of my grandson's bar mitzvah. I think it was 2006. Wait a second, he's born in 2006 would have been 13, right? That was, I'm sorry. We also went, we went 2006, but, we were twice. Once we were for the bar mitzvah, and then we went, I told you there's an organization, World Federation of Jewish Child Survivors, and we have conferences, and one year, about 2 or 3 years ago, it was in Israel, so we went. And we're going back. Next one.
Do you have family in Israel?
My daughter lives there now.
Oh, okay.
She moved to Israel about a year ago. I haven't seen her since she left. And I haven't seen her youngest either.
So how many grandchildren do you have?
I have 8 altogether. Right up there.
What was it like telling your children and then your grandchildren about your story and about surviving?
I think it was like the bits and pieces. Like my daughter, I'm trying to remember. Whenever my parents would come and visit us in St. Louis, my father would constantly talk about it, and he would talk in German, Polish, and my daughter is wonderful in languages, and she was studying German in school, and so she picked up a lot from my father, and somehow I really I don't know. I really don't have a real answer about that. I know that my grandchildren, except the youngest one, Aviva, they all read my book, both my books. So and they also when they in school they had a school assignment to interview me. So, and then like I said, but even Aviva, the little one who's 11 years old, she hasn't read my book yet, but she sort of picked up things. Also because Janina sends her, somehow Janina, the Polish woman, saw her picture and fell in love with her. So from time to time she sends her stuff. And of course, so she knows that Janina sends her stuff, the sweaters. Because most of the stuff she sends she can't use. Because, well, it's not that it doesn't fit, but you know, she goes to Beis Yaakov, she only wears long sleeves and long skirts, and that's not what Janina sends. Although she sent a sweater that she could use. And she sent her doll once, it was a beautiful doll. Yeah, so she sort of knows, she knows a little bit just also from listening on the conversation, whatever. But it's not that I sat them down and actually talked to them. It was, and of course, what you call Goldie, our oldest granddaughter, and Esther, who's in College Park now. You know, they were with me in Poland, so they were there when I talked to Janina. Although they don't know Polish, although Sarah, my daughter, understands a few words here and there because she heard. It was funny because when I was a kid with my parents, we would switch over from German to Polish back and forth without realizing it. And my daughter would understand the German, and then sometimes she would just stop and say, wait, you just switch it to Polish.
So, I just have two questions.
Sure.
How old is your oldest grandchild?
Goldie is 20. She was born in. Wait a minute. She's born in '86. That makes her what?
30.
No.
3.
I'm 22 and I was born in 1991, so she's 5 years older than me, so she's 27.
Yeah, she's 26. She's gonna be 27 in November.
Wow, why did I not know math? Because she's the same age as my sister.
And then, when you and your husband raised your kids, did you speak to them in German or in English?
English. I originally, when my daughter was born, I originally really wanted to raise her bilingual, German and English, but it just did not work out. My husband did not know enough. I mean, he understands German because he knows Yiddish. So if you know Yiddish, you understand.
Do you speak Yiddish?
I don't speak it. It's crazy because I understand Yiddish. My parents spoke Yiddish at home. But when I try to speak Yiddish, my German comes out. I joined a Yiddish club in St. Louis, and I quit because every time I opened my mouth, German came out. And I just couldn't help it. So I said, forget it, not worth it.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. When did you start kind of telling your story as a survivor to other people, and also when did you decide to write your books?
Okay, I started, when I first came back from Poland, I started talking the first time. After about a year or so, I started talking about the trip itself, not about me personally. And then then I started being a docent at the museum, and they had a director of the museum at the time, a woman who was not a very nice person. When I went to talk to her and said that I would like to maybe tell my story, she became very upset. She said, no, you were too young, you don't remember, it's not your personal memories, I cannot let you talk. You're not a real survivor. I said, all right. But anyway, she didn't last long because I wasn't the only one that she rubbed the wrong way. And so then they got a very, very nice gentleman, head of the museum, and he encouraged me to speak. And this was, it must have been in about 98, 99. I must have started being a docent. Wait a second. Dan Rich came to St. Louis in 98, so I must have been a docent before that. I must have started being a docent in 97 after I retired. And then started slowly speaking about 98 or 99. And as far as my book is concerned, was a very long process. First of all, I started writing short pieces. I started writing as a therapy, basically. It was therapy for me to get it out of myself. And in fact, there was a group in St. Louis St. Louis started an oral history project, and they put an ad in the St. Louis Jewish Light that they're looking for people who were children during the Holocaust. And I picked up the phone. I said, "That's me." I was just drawn to it. And so I was interviewed by this lady, and for this oral interview project, and then she wrote a book. She formed a group first of some of us who wanted, and I joined the group. I started feeling the need to talk, and so we met. I don't know, once a month or whatever. And then she decided that she was going to write a book about our stories. It's entitled "Too Young to Remember." But all our stories, except one, all the names have changed, all the circumstances will change. Unless somebody really knew me, they did not know which one of them. She changed the names, she changed the dates, she changed, the places. She changed everything. Because my kids right away knew who I was. My son says, "Come on, Mom." The first sentence, my grandparents were Orthodox, and the only one in that whole book whose parents were Orthodox. So, anyway, the grandparents. Anyway, and then I started writing. I've been interested in writing for a long time, for years. Still in the 60s, I took writing classes in college. And but then after I came back from Poland, I also joined this World Federation Child Survivor, and like I said, I started writing as a therapy. The first thing that I wrote was actually, I did not give my name. There is a newsletter, that was published. There was a newsletter called Hidden Child. It's an organization that is part of the ADL in New York. And they have a newsletter, I think, 4 times a year. And so I found out about it, and this was the first of my short articles that were published, and it just signed Felicia. I did not give my name. And slowly I started writing more, and I started writing about my trip to Poland, and that was published to several places. I started writing some articles for the Jewish Light, and I actually wanted to write my parents' story. I really did not want to write my story. But I had all these bits and pieces, and I had written about our trip to Poland, I had written about a night to remember, an evening that changed my life. This was the evening that I thought I was Jewish. I've written all these little, 1-2 page stories. And, but I never thought of writing a book or publishing a book. But I was looking for a writing class. By the way, I'm going to stop for a second. Whenever you ask a survivor a question, you're never going to get a quick answer. I figured that one out.
I think that's pretty much anyone.
Anyway, so I was looking for a writing class, and they have those adult education classes, and I couldn't find one that was conveniently located in St. Louis, my house, and there was the right time, right place. There was one that that I sort of caught on to, that said, how to publish your book in 6 weeks. So I said, well, I don't want to publish a book, but it's the only class that has something to do with writing, so, why not? So I enrolled in this class. Well, this lady, the teacher, became my teacher, my friend, my mentor, my pusher, my nagging. I told her that I wanted to write my parents' story. That's what I wanted to write. And I actually originally, so we talked back and forth and back and forth. She helped me get my thoughts together. And she said, well, what about you? I said, mine is not important. I want to write my parents' story. So she said, well, why don't you write 3 voices? Your father, your mother, and yourself. I said, okay. So I wrote a couple of chapters and just did not work. She read it, the class read it, and everybody told me this is not working. This is just, it's not working at all. So Bobby, my friend, said, why don't you just, you have so much material. You have almost, and then she came and listened to me talk to the group. She says, you've got your introduction right there. You've got this, you've got everything. You just have to put it together. So I started putting it together, and she would edit it, and I would re-edit it, and it was I think a 4-year span until it was published, because not only do you have to, when you publish a book, there's so much involved that I was not aware of writing a book, because not only do you need an editor.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yeah, I got it right before. I think I got it right after right before we left St. Louis.
So you were talking about
The book.
about
my
the
book,
4-year span.
Writing. If I had known what it takes to write a book, I would have never done it. It's not only that what you write and you have somebody edit it, and then you make the corrections that the editor, well, sometimes you don't agree with the editor, so you have to discuss it depending on your relationship with the editor. Sometimes depending how flexible you are, and I pride myself on being flexible. Anyway, and then, I don't know, she must have read this 6 times, every chapter, my editor. I mean, she practically knew that by heart. And then once you finish with this editor, then there's such a thing as a copy editor. And the copy editor, which I didn't even know what it was, is a person that checks for spelling, checks for grammar, punctuation, and I am a terrible punctuation. Punctuation, and what do you call it? So that that's another person. Then you have to find a publisher, and I could not find a publisher. I self-published, and I got this. I don't know. Have you heard of Sir Martin Gilbert? Sir Martin Gilbert is a very famous historian. He is he wrote about 80 some odd books, many of them the Holocaust. I have a couple of his books here. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth. He was the official biographer of Sir Winston Churchill. And many people, especially adults, know. They said, well, how did you get Sir Martin to write your foreword? And I said, only took a lot of chutzpah. Actually, what happened was, I got an email from somewhere that Gilbert had written a new book, and gave a link to his website. So I went to his website and looked around, and it said, well, if you want to contact Sir Gilbert, that's his email. So I said I got nothing to lose. So I emailed him, told him that I was writing. At that time, this is a manuscript, and wanted to know if he would be willing to read it. To my big surprise, he said, you send it to me, not email, snail mail, to England, and I'll read it. And so I did. And he called me. He called me from England. I was just like sudden shock. Yeah, I have a caller ID, and sometimes when it says caller unknown, I don't bother answering. I almost did not answer that call. And when I picked it up, and his British voice, he said, this is Sir Martin Gilbert, it's Felicia there, I almost fell off my chair. Anyway, he liked my book, and so I said, well, since he liked my book, he didn't have any comments in terms of, I said, do you have any, suggestions? He said something that was very unimportant. I said, well, since you like it, would you be willing to write me a foreword? So he said, well, he asked me, how do you plan to publish it? I said, I don't think I'm going to find a publisher. I'm planning on self-publishing it. He said, no, you've got to find a publisher. If you find a publisher, I will write you a foreword. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I did try. I wrote to 14 publishers. And by the way, writing to publishers is a job in itself, because every publisher has different rules and regulations. Some don't want any email, some want only email, some want what they call a sample chapter, some want only outline of chapters. Everybody wants something different. And anyway, I sent to 14 publishers, and I got 14 responses. Your book is very memorable, but it does not fit into our whatever. So I decided, this is ridiculous. So I emailed Sir Gilbert and said, I tried to find a publisher. I really did, but I just can't find one. Would you still be willing to write me a foreword? So he said, I got an email back, said, well, I will, but I'm very busy, so it might take me a while. And I said, okay, that's a good excuse. A week later, I had his foreword. I was so excited. And anyway, so after you have your editor and your copy editor, and then I went. Then my friend, they reread it looking for typos. I reread it, I don't know, twice. After everybody had read it, I read it at least once or twice, and I found all kinds of typos in there. And so it really. Oh, and then you have to find somebody you have somebody to put the cover. You have to find a title. Oh, and we talk back and forth about titles. You get a cover. Then you have to, when you send you have to have somebody to put it together to send it to the publisher. I don't know, all kinds of things about where the first of all the font, what kind of font you want, how you want to space the lines. I mean, all kinds of these little details that are just really, and then this has to be a certain width, and the margin has to be a certain width. And do you want each chapter to start on the right page, or you don't care? I mean, millions of details. But it took 4 years, and finally, I think it was in June of 2010, it came, and we were very, very excited. My father's book is of a totally different story, because that was actually, I started. It was, first of all, it was 12 hours of tape in German. I started transcribing the German in 1996. Of course, I didn't work on it every day, but once I transcribed it, then I translated it. And then my brother did most of the editing, but then I edited it again. I mean, my friend edited it again, and a copy editor had to send it to a copy editor. And what really took me a long time was very, very hard, a lot of work. In my father's book, I have historical notes, and that was very, very difficult for me because I didn't know what I was doing. I got a lot of the quotes that I got from Wikipedia, and I was told, my copy editor said, no, you can't do that. If you want to be taken seriously, you cannot use Wikipedia as a source. And then I did not do the exact quote, how to quote it, how to put the source. And then I found out that even if you give your source, you're only allowed a certain number of words that you can actually quote from it without permission, like 500 words. If you have more than 500 words, you have to get permission. And trying to get permission from some people is like pulling teeth. Some people are very nice about it, but there was one woman, very famous writer, also survivor. I went around for months trying to get her permission and finally gave up. So that was a big job, and so that's about it.
Also, did your brother grow up in Germany? He came over with your parents?
No, my brother started in Germany. My brother had the certain problems that I did in terms of being in a German school, mm-hmm. And he also went to England to finish school, and then he came to the States to go to college. He went to Long Island University, and then he was admitted to WashU in St. Louis to medical school, and he stayed in St. Louis.
What was your brother's name?
I'm sorry? My brother?
Yeah.
Leon Bialecki, Bialecki.
What was his first name?
Leon, Leon.
Will you expand on the night that you found out you were Jewish? Because I wasn't originally sure that you remembered a lot of it, and then you said it was the night that changed your life.
Well, it was a night that changed my life because it's in here.
Yeah, but do you mind just telling us a little?
No. I remember that night, and I think I will remember that as long as I live. It was in Brussels where we lived in, financially going to Belgium was a big downgrade, because in Poland my father, like I said, was very successful, and he had to leave everything behind. And another thing that he did was he changed all of his Polish zlotys into English pounds. However, thinking that they were worth more than the zlotys, they were safer. The Germans had manufactured false British pounds, and that's a fact. There was a movie about it called The Counterfeiters, and they had prisoners of war, many of them Jewish, printing false British notes. They wanted to undermine the British economy. They were going to do it with dollars too, but they never got around to it. And my father unwittingly bought the counterfeit. And so when he came to Belgium, we basically were penniless. And so the reason I'm saying this is because in Poland we had this beautiful apartment. Came to Belgium, we had like an apartment in the basement, and with I remember a single light bulb. And I remember that I was supposed to go to start school, and I heard throughout the day my mother telling my father, "You got to tell her I don't want her to go to school without knowing. You got to tell her. You got to tell her." And I don't remember if I was wondering what he was supposed to tell me, but in the evening, we were sitting around a table. My mother or father, I don't remember. I think my mother had my brother, who was about a year older at the time, on her lap. And I remember what he was wearing. He was wearing a blue bunting. And that's when my father told me that, that we were Jews, and that that he was my real father, that he was as much my father as my brother was, as he was my brother's father, and he started telling me about grandparents. And one thing that I don't remember that my mother was telling me is that I came from school every day asking questions. But one thing that I did that night, and whenever I speak to schools, everybody asks me, how did you react? And I really don't have a good answer. The only answer I give is just as if I felt as if like a fish that was put back into water. Because the first thing I did, like in a trance, before we left Poland, I had an au pair because my mother was sick and my brother was sick and somebody needed to take care of me. And my au pair gave me a little Catholic catechism. The first thing I did, I went to my room and tore it to pieces. No, I'm sorry I did. I would have liked to have kept it. But it just, it changed my life because I became a different person. It was not traumatic. Just like it was very easy for me to, change my lifestyle from a secular Jew to an observant Jew. In fact, I started observing Shabbat before, when we were dating, before the idea of marriage even came up. I just felt it was, my mother actually happened to have had changed her kitchen to a kosher kitchen because my brother was at bar mitzvah age and he got this bit of religion which he got over very quickly. But my mother had changed her kitchen. It's kosher, so that was not a problem. And it was really like that's where I belonged.
So your brother has never been Orthodox?
No. But one of his sons has become Orthodox.
But your children are.
Yes.
Yeah.
My daughter and her family are basically like we are what they call modern Orthodox.
Yeah.
My son, on the other hand, is a black hatter. You know what that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All his four sons. I'm sorry, he's got 3 sons, and son-in-law. They're all black hatters. My oldest granddaughter works, and her husband sits and learns at yeshiva.
Are you okay with that? I mean,
It's their lives. If they're happy, I have no problem.
Wait, so...
they know where I stand, and I don't wear shadel.
yeah.
My daughter doesn't wear shadel. My granddaughter does. My granddaughter-in-law does. My daughter-in-law does. And, they accept me as I am. They eat in my house. I was afraid that my grandson-in-law would not eat in my house. Because he's...
Worst fear for a grandmother.
Yeah.
Wait, but you keep kosher?
Yes.
Yeah, but some people it's not kosher.
Yeah,
fine,
kosher and kosher, but all my children and grandchildren eat in my house. One of my grandsons will only eat Chalav Israel milk. And so when he comes, I make sure to have, what Chalav Israel?
Yeah.
What actually? No.
It's a special kind of
boxed
milk.
or something.
No, it's like Chabad would have that, but like modern Orthodox would eat any dairy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really not necessary, but some people want to make life more difficult for themselves. Anyway, so when he comes, when he's in town, right now he's studying in yeshiva in Israel. You know, I make sure that I have halal Israel milk in the house, but like I said, I was very pleasantly surprised that my grandson-in-law, who is really very, very right-wing, you know, he never questioned an egg in my house. I mean, I would never. There were people that would not eat in my house. I mean, and I don't. It's fine with me. I mean, I understand. The only thing that I don't understand, and I get upset. It happened to me twice. Is that I prepare a meal and they don't tell me that they're not going to eat. That it happened a couple of times to me, but you know, it's fine with me. I mean, if they're happy, it's their life. Doesn't bother me.
Okay.
So you have 8 grandchildren, so does each of your kids have 4?
No, my daughter has 3. Okay, it goes counterclockwise. Goldie up there is the oldest. That's my sons. Is Goldie, Moshe, Hanania. Then Joshua is my daughter's. Esther is my daughter's. Shlomo is my son's. Tova is my son. No, Tova is my daughter's. And Aviva is my son's. So he's got 2 girls and 3 boys, and she's got 2 girls and a boy.
You said Goldie was your son's?
Yes.
And your daughter and Sarah lives in Israel.
Right. Sarah lives in Israel, but Joshua and Esther, they are in College Park. They will be graduating this because they're only 14 months apart, and they both be graduating at the same time.
Sorry, Moshe and Hanania are whose kids?
My sons, Moshe, Shlomo, and Hanania,
Moshe, Shlomo,
and Goldie and Aviva.
In your book, are there the years they were born? Is that in there at all?
Yes, apparently I made a mistake with Hanani's. Goldie was born in 86, Moshe in 88, Hanania, they're all 2 years apart. Hanania in 90, Joshua 91, Esther 92, Shlomo in 96, Tova in 96, and Aviva in 2002. Hey, I remember.
Are you part? You said you were part of that Survivors Net, the
Group?
Do you interact with in St. Louis? Did you interact with survivors here? Have you joined any groups?
I have. There is a group. There are a couple of groups here. There is one group that is really Washington, Baltimore. Mm-hmm. In fact, they have a meeting today. I got called if I wanted a ride. I said no, I can't. They meet once a month. The problem is that because it's Washington, Baltimore, it's usually held either in Potomac or in
Silver Springs?
Silver Springs or some other places. It's usually an hour's ride. Now, I've been a couple of times, and there's a gentleman who lives in Baltimore who's very sweet and calls me every time, wants to know if I want to go. I have a little bit of a hard time because it's just like, the meeting is at 1 o'clock. I have to leave at 12, then get back till 5. It's a big schlep. And I don't know anyone. I get, so it's hard. Okay, for me it's very difficult because the group in St. Louis, I founded. I knew every single person very well. You know, I knew their story, they were my friends. And here I come and I don't know anyone. So I have to get used to it. There's another group here, it's a purely social group, which I have not gone to yet, but they're purely social. In other words, they go to a baseball game, they go see a movie, they go to a concert. It's not really what I'm interested in. I'm more interested, our group in St. Louis was a support, social, and educational group. We had programming, all kinds of programming. We told our stories, of course, but after a while, how many times are you going to tell your story? You know, after a while, you sort of finish telling a story. If something came up, but we had a lot of programs with professors talking about what do you call resistance, about I forgot, can't even think about it. Various topics. Sometimes we saw a movie that had to be related, Holocaust related. Also, we also started a second generation, there's a Children of Survivors group, and then we sort of merged together. So there is supposed to be a second generation group here, but it's not functional, and it's not. And actually, I had a meeting. I was invited to a meeting about restarting it, and they were picking my brain, which was fine. I was more than happy to help, but you need somebody to get it started. And for a while, I was thinking maybe I will do it. I don't know. I've been so busy with other stuff that I don't know. So I haven't really found a survivor group that I'm comfortable with there yet.
Will you tell us about your brother? Are you guys close?
Not really. We never really. We're closer now probably than we've ever been as we get older. Well, our lifestyles are very different. Each one of us had our own. We had some major family problems, but I'm close. I'm quite close with his older son, and we're not terribly close, but we are on very friendly terms now. For a while, we didn't talk to each other. Happens in families sometimes.
Yes.
Can I ask you? This is going back a little bit, but
Sure.
when you came, what was it like adjusting to coming into the United States, and how did life differ? I guess.
Oh. Well, it was not easy. One reason it was not easy is, several reasons. First of all, life is very different here than it is in Europe. Even though I had been living in the American community in Frankfurt, Germany, among the American from 59 to 61 to 63, but still life is different here. Also, my husband's family, at least some members of the family, were not too crazy about having a foreigner joining, and my husband was a very, very large family. Had a very large family. Unfortunately, so quite a few of them passed away. Many of them that passed away. I remember when we came here, one of his cousins gave us a welcoming party, and all his family came. And first of all, my husband was the apple of his whole family. I mean, he was like that far away from God, okay, if that much, okay. And I really don't think any girl would have been good enough, but that didn't help me. But, I remember this whole family, I don't know, I didn't know anybody, of course. I knew one of his cousins. But everybody came over to me and said, "Oh, you are so lucky. He's such a wonderful guy. You are so lucky. You are so lucky. You are so lucky." Finally, one of his cousins, and she is just a doll, said, "Wait a second. He is lucky too." But it was difficult. His mother had a twin sister, and we stayed with them for a while, and they were very domineering ladies, and I did not have an easy time, and I was happy when we got our own apartment. And one person that I really loved dearly was my sister-in-law, my husband's sister. She was just, unfortunately, she died very young. She was 59 years old when she died. But she was just a doll. So there were a couple members that were very nice, but I had I did not feel accepted. I didn't feel, and by the way, it's not unusual from what I heard from other Europeans who married American soldiers to have the family not being too happy. We've been married for almost 54 years.
And just life in America in general, you adjusted quickly, or?
Well, I had to adjust because, first of all, I was a chaplain's wife. So I was a chaplain's wife already in Germany. So I was like the first lady of the community. Mm-hmm. So here was this little 19-year-old, and all of a sudden became, and I somehow always ran with the flow. I just did what I had to do. And this is basically also something that you will find if you read about child survivors, and I think I mentioned it before, is that we were raised to do what we were told. And this sort of carries on, this is what I had to do, this is what I had to do. Whether I liked it or not, it didn't make any difference. I mean, if I had had my druthers, I would never marry a rabbi, because that was not what I wanted. But I didn't marry a rabbi, I married a man. And so I had to take the consequences that were needed. But let's put it this way, I was very happy when he left the rabbin.
I just have to pause.